Thanks, John. Chair, that's the meeting open.
Thank you, Karen. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for turning up on a rescheduled meeting of a rescheduled one. So finally got here in the end. It's quite a short agenda, so hopefully we'll get through it quite quickly. But can we just go through the agenda? Number one, apologies for the record.
Chair, apologies from Chris Boyle, Peter Davidson, Hayley Mearns, and we've also from Advisory Officer Gillian Galloway today.
Fine, thank you very much. And item number two, declarations of interest in terms of the code of conduct of members of the public bodies. Has anybody got any interest to declare? No, I'm seeing lots of head shaking, so there's none there. Okay, so we go on to the main item, the only item on this agenda, which is item number 3, which is a report 6422 by the Chief Finance Officer on the 2021-22 audited annual accounts. So, Sandy, without further ado, can I just pass that straight over to you?
Thanks, Andrew. Can I also say thanks to everybody for kind of fitting this meeting in? And as Andrew's noted, it was a bit of a squeeze after what's happened over the last couple of weeks, so thanks for that. What I'll do is I think I'm going to hand over to Carol, if that's okay, Carol, because you'll probably want to have space to talk about your information that's included in this report. So just a timeline for everybody. We completed our draft unaudited accounts in June, and we shared those with the audit committee. After that meeting at the end of June, we passed them on to our auditors, Rachel and Mary. We've been working with closely over the last few months. They've obviously done their audit. We've had a few backs and forwards, conversations about various things. The output is we have done some minor amendments. I think the minor is my interpretation of what we've done. We've done a few adjustments to the accounts, minor amendments and some improvements reflecting feedback from the auditors and one or two bits and pieces. There's one point that you can see in the covering paper where we got some very late information in. We've discussed that with Rachel and agreed not to make an amendment to the accounts. Hopefully that's explained fully in the covering paper, but I know Carol's the external auditor's report also refers to that as well. So hopefully that feels okay for members, but Carol might refer to that as well. But otherwise, us having provided the information to Rachel and Mary, Carol, and Rachel, you've obviously got your completed audit, and I think I'll just hand over to you now because that's the substantive part of this paper here.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I'm happy to pick it up from there. And I also just want to thank everyone for accommodating this additional meeting, obviously in relation to the audit process, which we weren't quite in the place where we could conclude it at the last meeting. So I very much appreciate everybody accommodating us. I will start on the covering letter and then move into the annual report. I will go through it at a reasonable pace, so I promise I won't take too long. Just to say, in terms of the covering letter, just to note that we are issuing an unqualified audit opinions in the independent auditor's report, and the detail of that is contained in Appendix A to the covering letter. In accordance with the auditing standards, there are a few things that specific things that we have to confirm to those charged with governance, and as I go through the presentation, I will outline those for yourselves. Just within the covering letter, as Sandy just referred to, there is that adjustment that has not been processed. Just to confirm, this was due to a late grading decision, and it isn't an area of concern that I'm drawing to your attention. It is just there as the auditing standards require us to disclose any unadjusted misstatements that are above the clearly trivial threshold. The key thing in terms of the covering letter is paragraph 6, which is on page 6 of the combined papers. And that is a formal requirement in the auditing standards that in presenting the report, I seek confirmation from yourselves of any instances of any actual, suspected or alleged fraud, any subsequent events that have occurred that you want to draw to my attention, or any material non-compliance with laws and regulations. So I tend to pause slightly here to give anyone the opportunity to raise their hand or speak if there was anything that they wanted to draw to my attention. And
You don't expect a rush of people.
No,
okay.
I never do, and I am always happy when I don't receive a rush of people. And I think that reflects the working relationships that we have, that if anything was occurring, that Sandy would have drawn it to our attention. So thank you for that. The final thing in the covering letter is just the Appendix B, which is the draft letter of representation, which is part of the audit process that we will receive alongside the signed accounts, hopefully later on today. So that moves us into the body of the annual audit report. The annual audit report comprises the findings both of our audit of the financial statements, which are in front of you in the annual accounts, but also our consideration of the 4 audit dimensions that frame the wider scope of public audit. And I will just go through the high-level messages just now. One thing I would like to say on paragraph 11 of page 19 of the combined papers, that is just where we confirm to you that we have complied with the Financial Reporting Council's ethical standards, that we haven't undertaken any non-audit related services which could potentially have a conflict, and we aren't aware of any relationships that would comprise our objectivity or independence. So that's really just for your assurance to be aware of that. Just at the bottom of page 19, we also just note that this is the final year of the audit appointment, and that Audit Scotland will continue as the appointed auditor as we move forward. We're still working through the arrangements in terms of what that will mean for the audit team, but we'll be in communication and discussion once that's finalised. And if there are any changes, then we'll make sure that there's a well-managed transition through the process in relation to that. So into a bit more of the detail, as I mentioned in the covering letter, the audit opinions and the annual accounts are unmodified. We note at paragraph 18 that the unaudited accounts were received in line with our agreed timetable, that they were of a good standard, and that we received excellent support throughout the audit process to enable us to progress the audit. Just as I mentioned at the start, obviously there was a delay, as I mentioned at the last meeting, of us concluding our audit work. And that was really just due to the nature of the IJB and the assurances we need from the partner bodies and the work that has to be concluded within them. So it's nothing of concern in relation to the audit process or the accounts that are in front of you. We did revise our materiality on receipt of the accounts, and there's just a bit of detail of that in Exhibit 1. The next section I don't get to see very often to audit committee, so we have no significant findings to report on the audited annual accounts, and that absolutely holds true with what Sandy said about there being some minor adjustments following the audit process, but there is nothing of a level that I would be drawing it to your attention. Exhibit 2 outlines the significant risks that we identified in our annual audit plan, and also the conclusions from our work. And you will see that we have concluded them satisfactorily from the work that we have undertaken. The other thing, just to see at paragraph 29 on page 23 of the combined papers, is just that we had identified a couple of other areas of specific audit focus on large hospital set-aside and mental health services. And we have concluded our audit procedures, and they are accurately reflected and accounted for within the financial statements. So just to conclude the points for yourselves. The report also notes the good progress that's been made on prior year recommendations, and you can see the detail of them in Appendix 1 to our report. Moving into the financial management and sustainability section, our work has confirmed that the budget monitoring arrangements are appropriate, and that there are sound systems of internal financial control in place, and that they operated during the year. On page 25 of the combined papers, we note that the IJB returned a 18.1 million underspend for the year, and that was largely due to COVID-19 funding received late in the financial year. Just for information, I wanted to flag that I think just last week, well, the 12th of September, Scottish Government wrote to IJBs to inform them that due to some changes in public health policy, there is an intention to reclaim and redistribute some of these IJB reserves that related to COVID funding. There isn't specific details at the moment, but it's just to make you aware that we will add a little paragraph into the report just to reflect that, given that it is now that the letter has now been issued, and just as an area that you will have to keep under review, and I'm sure Sandy will update you as it progresses in terms of the impact for Angus IJB. Exhibit 4 on page 27 just concludes the risk we identified in the annual audit plan in relation to financial sustainability, the work that we've done, and our conclusions in relation to that. We note at paragraph 45 that there continues to be significant financial pressures and that more needs to change in terms of delivering a financially sustainable service in terms of the service delivery, and we make a recommendation in relation to that. Moving into the final significant section in relation to governance, transparency and best value. At paragraph 47 on page 29 of the combined papers, we reported last year that number of governance publications were not up to date and available on the website. There has been some progress on this, but we do recognise that it has been overtaken by other priorities. But it is something that you should, keep monitoring and ensure that you are progressing it. Overall, we concluded that the governance arrangements are appropriate and that they support effective scrutiny, challenge and decision making. We make another recommendation just after paragraph 50, just in relation to expected kind of future changes at senior management level, and just to ensure that succession planning is a key factor that's taken into account in that, to ensure a smooth transition when significant changes in staffing senior management occurs. We also note that the IJB now recognises workforce challenges as its most significant risk, and the work that is underway with partners to recruit people into the key roles, and how the new ways of working will be developed to meet local needs. One of the things I did want to draw to your attention was just at paragraph 53 and 54, and throughout page 30 of the combined papers. It's just in relation to the Best Value Assurance report for Angus Council that was published in July. It included quite detailed coverage of elements of the IJB services and performance. There were a lot of positives within the report, including a number of case study examples. And I think it's important that I draw that to your attention, and that is on your radar in terms of looking at it and the messages that it contains for the IJB. As I previously mentioned, it does conclude that the way services are delivered needs to change to secure financial sustainability, but that is obviously something that you're very much aware of and working on at the moment and throughout. Just as a call it to a conclusion, we note that the performance remains above the Scottish average in most areas, but obviously there has been an impact on the service performance levels due to the pandemic, which is consistent across Scotland and not unexpected. We also note that there are effective arrangements for managing and reporting performance, which is an important element of the governance and the scrutiny role that you have. One of the final things in the body of the report is just at the bottom of page 32 of the combined papers, from paragraph 71 to 73. We draw out some good practice points. That flows through from the Best Value Assurance report, but it really does indicate some of the good work that has taken place in shifting care from hospitals into the community and some new service delivery models. So I felt it was important that I kind of highlighted that as part of this kind of presentation moving through the report. Final couple of areas is just the Appendix 1 includes the action plan, both for the 2 recommendations we have made this year and also the progress on the prior year recommendations. And Appendix 2 is just a summary of some of the national performance reports and briefing papers that may be of interest to the committee. Finally, before I open up for questions, I just want to note my thanks and the thanks of the audit team for all of the support that we've received throughout the audit process. It's very much appreciated. and we recognise that it is done alongside many other priorities and pressures that people are facing. So that was all I would like to say, and happy to answer any questions.
Fine, thanks very much, Carol. Is that okay if I just take over here, Sandy? Thanks very much for your report, and also for all the hard work you guys are doing, you know, sort of to go along with the delays, etc., and managing that process, and it's great. So the report is really very good. It's nothing of concern, no significant risks that we don't know about and we're already working on, and above the Scottish average in most areas, and some cited elements of good practice. And I would like to add that is in no small amount due to the efforts of Sandy and his team that the process worked so well. So I'd like to sort of record that thanks to Sandy. I have one question, because essentially the numbers stay the same as far as the finance goes. Okay, we've polished up the report, but essentially the finance, apart from that misstatement report, is exactly what we saw before. But I have one question: is why was there a delay in the first place? And also, will that ever happen again? I would like to avoid that, because it's put us to quite a bit of administrative extra effort. So is there some way that can be addressed, or lessons learned from what happened? What was the delay? Sandy, I guess, maybe, I don't know who to put that one.
No,
I
am happy to come in, because very much the delay sits with the audit process, and it is not anything in relation to Sandy's management of it or engagement or anything like that. It's something we would all like to avoid. I think it is we are still experiencing challenges around some of the elements of auditing remotely. We are taking steps to try and remedy that, but we do find that it naturally takes longer when you're not on site and you don't have the same ability to, it sounds silly, but just wander across and catch someone at their desk and be able to have that kind of informal discussion to move things along and clear things. We are finding that as an impact. We are looking at ways that we can kind of change our audit approach, bring in more data analytics, try and look at different ways to get some of our assurance. The truth is, we probably weren't far away from being able to achieve the previous date, but we just couldn't quite get it to where we needed to get it to. So I can't ever provide categorical assurance that it won't happen again in the future. But we very much do look to minimise it, and it is something that we are absolutely learning from in terms of even prioritising in the partner bodies the work that is undertaken by the audit teams to provide the necessary assurances, because it is quite focused in certain areas, and it's just about ensuring we ensure that all of our teams are on the same page in relation to that. So it sits with the audit process. We absolutely are trying to learn less, and we will look to ensure that it doesn't happen going forward. But I can't always guarantee it.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Carol. That's very useful, and once again, thanks for your efforts, and because it's just as much an administrative issue for you as well. I've got one hand up in the air. That's Peter Burke, if you'd like to ask.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I echo your comments both to Sandy and to Carol about the hard work that's been done to prepare this report. One thing that's been troubling me, and I guess a number of us, is whether there's a risk, well, what the risk is for the transference to the National Care Service. I can't imagine it'll be done at the throw of a switch. I can imagine services being drifted across to whatever format the NCS takes. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a risk of cost or manpower, workforce, and so on. I don't know what that risk is, and I think that's maybe why we should be flagging it. Maybe it's too early this year, maybe it's next year, but it is I think it's a serious risk that we will be caught and won't be able to respond quickly. But however, so.
I mean, I'm happy to come in on that, just to say that we do, and we have a central team alongside the local audit teams. We have a central team within Audit Scotland that's very much keeping on top of developments, and we will bring that detail. We'll flow that through the audit process as well. But yeah, it is a risk, undoubtedly, and I'm sure it's something that Sandy, etc., are not on top of, but are fully sighted on, and feeding it through to their processes.
Tony, you've got your. Are you finished?
Yes, sorry, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I noticed that Tony had his hand up. It's gone.
Yes, I did. So I think, picking up Peter's point, I mean, I know some of my clients are looking at the National Care Service in a variety of risks. And we need to be careful how we recorded those, but there's the structural ones that Peter mentioned. There's also the relationship issues and the support service issues. So the point around, what is an already, and we've discussed many times, and I'm not going to raise it again too much because Sandy flinches every time I do, but we have a list of outstanding actions, and that's mostly because we simply don't have the resources and we don't have the access to resources from elsewhere. When you do have a reorganisation, there is always a thing that people are thinking about their positions. There is a distraction. From my perspective, there's a risk I've spoken to a number of clients about, which is the risk that the really important and difficult decisions we need to take now are deferred because people say, oh, hold on, the National Care Service is coming. Don't go there, because there will be very difficult decisions, and it looks like they'll be more difficult than perhaps we thought. And there is the issue, and I want to make it clear, I'm not talking about Angus Council here in particular, but in general, I've had a number of discussions with IJB's COs about the fact that as, in particular, local authority resources are going to transfer across, there is an issue of just general technical discussions about how the support services that relate to those come across. Those can be quite tricky, quite difficult, quite time-consuming, but also there is a tendency, and again, not criticising, if you're handing over a service, your amount of prioritisation you're going to give to that service, the amount of focus, attention, TLC you're going to give to that service may suffer. And I'm not saying that's true of Angus, but it's certainly the case I've seen, and I've seen a difference in the relationships, particularly between local authorities and IJBs, since the National Care Service was announced. It feels like something that might at least be considered for the risk register, even if not all of those aspects it would perhaps be sensible to record, or they would need to be recorded delicately. But I think having a think about that panoply of risk, all that range of it, at a time when circumstances are getting extremely difficult, might be something to think about for the risk register.
Thank you, Tony. Sandy, you've got your hand up. Is that in response to Peter's question? Or
yes, it's in response to this general issue. So I think, as an action, we can definitely take an action away to consider putting this on our risk register and looking at the scope and whether it does need to be there in the scope of what we would put in. I mean, clearly, I suspect the Scottish Government are not doing this to generate risks in the system. The type of risks that Tony has described there, I suppose, are the behavioural ones, and that's something that we can all contribute to try to mitigate from our end and work with our partners to do that as best we can. But it can be difficult, and we know when we set the IJBs up and we did the first big health and social care integration work in 2015 leading up to 2016, there were difficult conversations in there, and it did stretch us all. Peter, you talked about when might this happen? When, not so much when might this happen, but the timing is a thing. And timing, you're right. That probably is going to trigger when we start to flag it up more or discuss it more inside the IJB, and as well as the organisational side of the National Care Service and the structural side of it. There is a big important thing about, is it going to do some different things? Are government going to put some policy commitments in there? And we don't really know how much policy commitment the government are going to piggyback or build into the National Care Service. That'll become clear over time. And that I suppose is the other side of it, not just the organisational changes and the structural change, but also the policy content. So I think the policy stuff will become clearer in due course. But collectively, we'll take an action to think about, consider whether this needs to go into a risk register and whether that needs to happen about now.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, has anybody else got any questions specifically about the substance of the report in front of us today, or anything else?
Chair, I could just maybe chip in. Would that be okay, Andrew? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, just to say a number of the points that Carol has flagged up earlier on, about things like the changes in the COVID funding that has just come through relatively recently. Yeah, we will be updating the IJB about that. We actually had something in our August report, but that's been overtaken by information that's come through in September. The sustainability of the IJB and the delivery of kind of savings to ensure we can continue to stay in balance. We're working on that through the strategic planning group, and 2 or 3 of you will be members of the strategic planning group, and you'll be seeing things come through there already. Carol, you noted in your report the prominence of the workforce risk. That is key and is such a big focus for us right now as we've kind of come out of COVID, and it was something that was already affecting us during COVID, all the various workforce pressures. But it's something that we are doing all we can to try and resolve that. It is difficult, and there's not any particular ready-made solutions on that one. But again, the IJB will see that coming through various reports. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree. All those points you flagged up are important ones for the audit committee to be noting in this report. But Andrew, that's all I really wanted to add. Thanks.
Yeah, so just kind of summarise kind of what I understand you're saying is that we've got lots and lots of earmarked reserves, but they're kind of under the auspices of COVID recovery, and it's very likely that these will be clawed back if they're not required by the government. So essentially leaving us with possibly the original problem we had of a 6 million shortfall in a couple of years' time.
Yeah,
is that a correct summary?
Yeah, the COVID reserves were always, and we saw this in some of the August IJB papers, were always to help the whole system. And we'd already knew that in the IJB papers from the August meeting that we were going to be working with the secondary care sector, the acute sector, to mobilise those funds. And I think what's happened now, and the communications that Carol alluded to, is rather than us directly working with the acute sector in Tayside to make sure that funding is mobilised across the whole system, we are probably going to see a more direct interaction with the Scottish Government. They'll revise how they're going to deal with that, and they'll take it from there. So it's almost changed the triangle of conversation a wee bit. That seems to be how it's emerging, but we're not quite sure yet. We just know things have moved on a wee bit since we wrote the August financial report for the IJB.
Okay, thank you very much. So, any other questions? I don't see any hands up. So, given that we're here today to consider the previous 12 months audit as represented in this report and the attached financial statement, I'll go straight to if I can find it, the recommendations and go through them with you. Okay, we're asked, if there are no final questions, we're asked to 3 recommendations. Number 1, consider and accept the external auditor's annual audit report for Angus IJB as in Appendix 2 and the associated cover letter Appendix 1, which includes the proposed independent auditor's report for the period 31st of March 2022. Specifically, this includes noting the key audit report recommendations and accepting the agreed management action. So it's quite a mouthful. Secondly, consider the annual accounts and then approve the audited annual accounts for signature by the Chair, Chief Officer and Chief Finance Officer. And then finally, request that updates regarding management actions are reported at the next audit committee meeting in December. So do we agree with recommendation 1?
Agreed.
No dissent. Oh, yeah. Recommendation 2
Agreed.
and recommendation 3.
Agreed.
Fine. So, okay. Well, that kind of concludes the meeting, and thanks everybody for turning up. We don't have next meeting on the agenda, but I do note the fact there is a risk appetite development session on the 26th of October, and also our next scheduled meeting is the 7th of December. Sandy, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, could I just chip in with a couple of comments as we kind of wrap up, Andrew? Would that be okay?
Well, certainly, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. One was along the lines of what you were saying. We did originally plan to have an IJB Audit Committee development session at the end of October, but we've deferred that because we're going to have that the whole IJB development session about the risk appetite. So we will reschedule the Audit Committee's development session, maybe for November or another date, and we'll get back to you all about that. A small wee aside regarding the last paper, we're going to sign the accounts electronically this afternoon, and Gail Smith, myself and Emma Jane Wells are all geared up to sign things for Rachel and Carol. That's just to kind of wrap that bit up. But Andrew, I would just like to say, given that we're completing our audit term with this Audit Scotland team, and to record our thanks, a big thanks to Rachel and Mary in particular, who've worked with on the ground, and Carol in terms of your input as well as we've been taking these reports through our committee. It's gone by really quickly, and it has been 5 years, I think, that we've been at this. But you know, I've always found working with Rachel and Mary, hopefully, I'm saying it from my perspective, very constructive input from you both, and hopefully it's felt that way both ways, but also very supported in terms of trying to deal with the complexities we've sometimes had to deal with. We had difficulties as we were changing our accounts for things like COVID, not this year, but the year before, and technical issues always pop up, and the feedback has always been very helpful, and that has helped us bring things to our audit committee as smoothly as I think we reasonably could. So I'd just like to make as we kind of reach the end of this audit term, just note our thanks to the team.
Yeah. Thanks very much for those words, Sandy. And I echo those, and I'm sure everybody else, I see a few hands going up, thumbs going up. So yeah, team, thanks very much, and it's been great working with you. So has anybody got any final words to say? Rachel, Carol? No. So with that, thank you very much for your attendance, and I'll bring the meeting to a close now.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Chair. John, can you stop?